Welcome. This mini course is designed to help you prepare to take the Praxis II Elementary Education Content Knowledge Test in mathematics. This part of our training is focused on test-taking strategies. In order to help you take this test, you need to be calm and relaxed and know what you're getting yourself into. So let's first talk about what this test entails. This is the mathematics subtest number 5033. The passing score is a 164. In order to take this test, you must take all 4 tests the first time you take it. That means you have to take the science, the social studies, the math, and the language arts all together. You can't just take one test alone. After you take the first 4 tests, if any of the tests you don't pass, you can just take that subtest alone. So you can take the math subtest alone if you don't do well the first time. The math subtest is 50 minutes long, and there are 40 questions. That means you have to go at a fairly rapid pace. The format is completely multiple choice, so there's never a time when you would have to write in your own answer. There are 4 possible answers for each question. The topics that are covered on the math part of this test are number operations and operations in algebraic thinking in part 1, and then geometry, measurement, data, and interpretation in part 2. The test center will provide scratch paper, so you probably will not be allowed to bring anything in with you, but they will give you plain blank paper. You may write anything on the paper. It's collected at the end of the test, but the answers on the paper are not counted. They don't look at it. They just hold on to it at the end of the test to make sure that you weren't cheating in any way. In order to register for the test, you need to go to the ETS website. You can click on the link here that gives general information. You can take the test as a paper and pencil test, or you can take it as a computer-based test. The paper and pencil test is a traditional test, as I'm sure you've taken many, many times before. The computer-based test is done on a computer screen with a keyboard. You'll be sitting at a desk, and you go to a computer center in order to take the test. The advantage to the computer-based test is that you can take it in a wider range of dates. Basically, you call up the computer test center, and they will tell you what dates they have available, and then you can take it. So if you're short on time and want to take the test quickly, the computer-based test is probably a better choice. If you're not comfortable on computers, the paper and pencil test is probably a better choice. Let's talk about how to prepare for the test. The first thing is to make a study plan. We have included a study plan document that is available on Blackboard. Download that and adapt it for your own use. We recommend that you plan 4 weeks for preparing for the math test. That's just the math test. It works out well to do 1 week per topic, and we'd recommend 5 to 7 hours per week. If you can spend a little bit of time every single day, that is best. We have found that the most common reason why people don't do well on the math test is that they do not prepare enough. For many students, this is a difficult test and requires a lot of preparation. So 4 weeks is probably the minimum that you'll want to plan. Let's talk about learning math. Learning math is a little bit different than other topics and other tests because it's sequential. So in other words, if you missed out on important topics in elementary school, you need to relearn them now. It's possible, for example, that you're weak in fractions or converting decimals. Those are going to affect how well you can do higher level math. So essentially, you're going to need to figure out where you might have some gaps in your knowledge and then go back and rework those gaps. So in order to do well in math, there's 4 things that you need to be able to do. First, you need to be able to understand the material. In other words, to know how to add fractions. Then secondly, you need to really process that material to get it deeply into your long-term memory. And then third, you need to apply what you've learned to solve problems. So you might be able to multiply fractions, but if you don't realize that the problem is asking you to multiply fractions, then you won't be able to apply what you've learned. And then fourth, you've got to remember what you've learned in order to learn new topics. So you might know how to add or multiply fractions, and then you're going to need to use that to learn more advanced topics that require you to do that as part of it. So learning math is fairly complicated. Many of us have a very deep-seated fear of math. Perhaps you didn't do well in math in school. Perhaps you've struggled for many years. Perhaps you like math, but you still have some challenges. So the first step in completing this course is I want you to listen to yourself talk. What do you say to yourself when you think about preparing for math, and when you think about the math praxis test? What kinds of things come up in your mind? Do you find yourself saying, oh, I'm terrible at math, I'll never be able to pass this, I'm not going to be able to do it? Because those types of self-talk statements are influencing how well you can learn math. So I want you to think about responding to that inner voice of yours with positive statements. I'm good at math. I enjoy solving math problems. I can pass this test. It doesn't matter if you don't believe these statements right now. The important thing is that you say them to yourself. Say them out loud. Say them in your internal voice. Write these statements on an index card and keep them in a spot where you can read through them daily. You might want to put them into your pocket, into your purse, slip them into your notebook so while you're in class you can pull them out and say them to yourselves over and over and over and over again. What we're trying to do here is to change your beliefs about math. This can be done. I know this might sound silly to just be saying these positive things, but a lot of research has shown that this actually works pretty well. Remember that working hard, studying and practicing math is more important than being smart in math. Some of us might believe that we just don't have what it takes, but we know that that's not true. The more you study, the more you practice, the more you get good at math. The problem is that for many of us, our anxiety leads us to avoid math. I've had many students come into me and say, please help me get my college degree without taking a lot of math. In essence, what you need is the reverse of that. The more you fear math, the more you need to do it. And to get over your fear and to gain some confidence. So what happens is that your fear of math leads you to not study or practice enough, and then you start to believe those voices that tell you I'm no good at math. Well, the reason why you're not as good at math is because you haven't spent the time to practice and study. So my advice is to follow your study plan. Create that plan, post it where you can see it, refer to it often. Let's talk about test anxiety. Even if you don't have fear about math, you might have fear about tests. Recognize your body's reaction to those tests. When you think about taking this test, or when you think about the standardized test that you've taken in the past, what comes to mind? Do you get stomach cramps? Do you feel a little nauseous? Do you start to sweat? Do you get a pain in your neck or shoulders? Perhaps your heartbeat races or skips beats. You might find that you're not breathing deeply enough. You might even get dizzy. I want you to start recognizing your body's reaction so that you start noticing when you feel anxiety. You might be tense and anxious and not even realize you're anxious. So start to notice these responses. Over the next 4 weeks, when you're studying for math, you're also going to be studying how to keep yourself calm. The most common way to relax yourself is with deep, slow breathing. When you do this, you're going to want to inhale as deeply as you can so that your lower abdomen, your stomach should be going out and not just your chest. So fill it up all the way into your stomach. And then focus on taking a long time to exhale. You might count down from 20 to 1 slowly as you breathe. So in other words, take a breath and count 20. Then take a breath and count 19. Take a breath and then count 18. Take this nice, deep, long breath and again, breathe out very slowly. You want to focus on making the exhale longer than breathing in. Another technique is to use visual imagery. You can imagine yourself in a safe place. So think to yourself right now, what's a place that I feel really comfortable in? Perhaps it's sitting at the beach on a a chair, on a lounge chair. Perhaps it's sitting in your living room watching TV. Perhaps it's in the shower. Perhaps it's in the bed early morning. Perhaps it's getting a hug from somebody. So imagine yourself in that safe place. That's sort of your visual imagery. That's your go-to place, so that when you start to feel those bodily sensations, maybe your stomach starts to clench or your shoulders get tight, close your eyes and imagine yourself in that safe place. Take 10 seconds or so to really picture yourself there. Another strategy when you're breathing is to breathe in all of your worry. Imagine all of those worries that you have about this test, about math, about passing the Praxis, getting your license. Breathe all of that in really deeply, and then breathe it all out in a peaceful way. Imagine peace coming out instead of all of those worries. Do that 4 or 5 times. Another relaxation technique, especially if you find that you are very tense in your body from your anxiety, is called tighten and release. And the idea behind this is that in order to relax, we're going to really feel the difference between being tense and being relaxed. So, for example, you can take your shoulders right now and tense up your shoulders as tight as you can make them. Tense, 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 tight, 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 tight. And now relax them. Deeply relax them. Feel all of that tension leave you. And you can do that with different muscle groups. Let's try it again. Let's take your fists and tighten your fist. Tight, 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 tight. Tight as you can make it. Hold it, hold it, hold it, and now release. Feel that calming. Feel how your muscles just completely relax. So what you can do is go through all the different muscle groups in your body. You might want to start with your face, then move to your shoulders, your arms, your back, your legs, your ankles, your feet, or you could start at the bottom and go to the top. Another relaxation technique is grounding. You're going to put your feet on the floor, feel yourself sitting comfortably in your chair, and then just pay attention to what is going on around you. Notice the sounds you hear that you might not have heard. A ticking clock, the traffic rolling by, the kids playing in another room, the dog breathing. Feel the chair on your body. Feel it touching your back. Feel it touching your legs. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your feet in your shoes. Focus on that for a few minutes, and that will help to calm some of the anxiety. So my advice is to choose 1 or 2 of these relaxation techniques. As I went through these, hopefully 1 or more of them felt good to you. And practice these every day, 3 or 4 times. If you don't practice them regularly, you're not going to be able to use them during the test. So perhaps when you first wake up in the morning, maybe driving in the car or sitting on the bus, whenever you can, practice these relaxation techniques. You don't have to be anxious to practice them. You can practice them at any time, and they will help you when you really need it. We talked about our inner voices when we were talking about fear of mathematics. Let's talk about our inner voices in our fear of tests. Perhaps you found yourself saying to your friends or to yourself, I can't take tests. I always do poorly on multiple choice tests. I won't be able to finish. These tests are unfair. These inner voices add to your anxiety. And the anxiety actually causes mental blocks, and your brain can't function effectively. When you get anxious, there are certain hormones that are released that prevent you from using the parts of your brain that you need to in order to be able to do a math test. So once again, let's try to calm those inner voices. Come with some self-talk that's more positive. I can do well on this test. I can show all I've learned. I'm a good test taker. The same as what we did before with the math anxiety. Write these on cards. Look at them. Practice saying them every day. So along with your relaxation exercises, you're also going to use self-talk cards. Look at them and practice them. When you notice your negative self-talk, I want you to practice something we call thought stopping. You might put a rubber band on your wrist and you can snap it every time you hear yourself use that negative self-talk, or you can just shout stop to yourself in your head. When you notice that you're saying, oh, I can't do tests, or I'm afraid of this test, that's a good time to use some of the breathing techniques we talked about before. Or perhaps you want to just stretch. If you're sitting in a chair, just stretch your arms out, stretch your back, your neck, get up, lean over, touch your toes, stretch a little bit. Get your mind to stop. Don't let yourself keep talking about how badly you're going to do or how frightened you are. Now let's talk about how to study for the test. First, think about where to study. Try to pick an area where you're going to spend a couple of hours, 3 or 4 times a week. A quiet area separate from the living area if you've got the room, separate from your bedroom. Preferably this is an area just for studying. I know that's not always possible, but even if it has to be in your bedroom or your living room, have it be the same place if you can. Perhaps you can come on campus and find a room that you like on campus that you can use for studying. Perhaps you just want to go to Starbucks or your favorite coffee shop or your diner and sit and have that be your study area. Bring your study plan and schedule. If you're at home, put that up on the wall so that you look at it each time. If you're out on the campus or at the coffee shop, put your study plan on the front of your notebook and take that out and make sure you're following your schedule. Also take those positive affirmation cards. Those are the self-talk cards. I can do this. I'm good at math. I can show all that I learned on my test. Write out those cards, keep them with you, and before you begin a study session, read through those cards. At the end of the study session, read through those cards. If you find that you're getting frustrated during your study session, read through those cards. Create a calendar and mark the dates and times for studying. This is the same as the planning chart that we've been talking about. Consider the time of day. I know many people plan to study late at night after they've gotten their kids to bed or they've come home from work and met all their requirements. But the problem is when you're really tired, you're not going to be as efficient. So if at all possible, choose a time of day when you're most efficient. Make sure you have all your materials ready. If you don't have all those materials ready, then you're going to procrastinate and you're going to spend time finding your pencils, finding your calculator, getting a water bottle. We'll do anything to get out of the studying that's difficult. So try to have all that ready so that you don't have anything to distract you. Keep to your study plan. Create a contract with yourself and sign it. Post it where you can see it. Give it to your significant other. Find a friend who can help you stay on your plan. Be aware of the self-talk that defeats your plan. We've talked about self-talk a lot. You might hear yourself saying, oh, I can skip studying today. I'm really tired. I worked so hard at work. I just can't do it today. I'll study twice as long tomorrow. We always think we're going to do better tomorrow. We always think that we'll be more motivated, less tired. But the truth is tomorrow is going to be just like today. I don't really need to study as much as that. They were exaggerating. I don't really need 4 weeks. I don't really need to do this every day. We have all sorts of ways of tricking ourselves into avoiding things that are difficult for us. Be prepared to talk back to your inner voice. Imagine that that's a friend who's talking to you. What would you say to a friend who needed to pass this test and who was saying these things to you? So think about what you're going to talk back to your inner voice. You might want to write those down too so that you can read them. Be strong. Don't let that self-talk defeat you. Let's now talk about the importance of sleep. Lacking enough sleep for 3 nights in a row is the same as being drunk during your tests. It affects your brain that much when you don't get enough sleep. So sleep is important as studying. And sleep is fun. Sleep is great. So this should be the easy part of preparing for the test. Without enough sleep, you cannot access what you learned from your brain. So make a commitment to going to bed earlier until the test. Once you're done with the test, you can go back to your bad habits. But in these 4 weeks that you're preparing for the test, try to get as close to 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night as you possibly can. Okay, let's talk more about how to actually study. There are some good memory techniques that you can use, and let's review some of them. First, organize the material you need to learn. We're trying to help you do that through this study program, but you're going to want to break things down into clusters, chunks, and principles rather than memorizing isolated facts. Again, we're going to help you to do this. As you're working through the problems and the training program, try to visualize the steps of a problem. Get out your notebook, make a diagram. Try to be able to see it if at all possible. You're also going to want to make associations. So link the new facts or ideas to what you know already. Recall old facts. Make a mental picture to link to them. Perhaps things remind you of something else you've done in mathematics before, or even in another subject before. So as much as you can, link the new information to what you already know. You can also use mnemonics. You've been doing this since you were a child in elementary school. Perhaps the most common mnemonic of all time is the order of operations, where we learn, please excuse my dear Sally, as a way of standing for the order in which we do things in operation. So we are going to do the parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication or division, and then addition or subtraction. So again, we can use these mnemonic devices. Don't be afraid of them. Learn the mnemonics. We'll be offering you some help and some suggestions for doing this. Use number sense and estimations. Always say to yourself, does this answer make sense? Look back at the problem and think to yourself, yeah, but is this reasonable? And monitor yourself as you're learning the different, or relearning the different steps. Ask yourself, am I really understanding this? Do I really know this yet? What is still confusing? This is your program, and it's self-directed. So if you're not understanding this, you can go back, review it, do it again and again. Unlike a math class where the teacher's going to move on even if you're not really solid, in this program you don't have to move on. Monitor yourself. If you're not ready, go back and review again. Let's talk about some more test-taking strategies. Should I guess? This is a very common question for multiple choice tests, and on the Praxis II in mathematics, your score is based on the number of questions you answer correctly, with no penalty or subtraction for answering a question incorrectly. So in other words, guess. By all means, guess. But there are better ways of guessing. So if you really can't figure it out an answer, look at all the answers before you select one. Cross out any answers that are obviously wrong. If you can eliminate any of the answers at all, then you're going to have a better chance at getting them correctly. So for example, there's always going to be 4 answers. So your chance is 1 in 4, 25% of getting it right just by guessing. But if you can cross out 1 or 2 of those answers, your chances of getting it right by guessing go up quite dramatically. Do not leave any question blank. Guess if you don't have time or if you can't figure it out. If you can't figure out a solution, another thing you can try is to plug in each answer into the problem. So you've got 4 answers. You know that one of those must be right. So you can actually take each answer and try it in the problem and see if you can get it to work. It's not a solution for every problem because it takes a long time and you're going to have to go quickly through these problems. But for the ones that you're stuck on, it's a good way of getting an answer. There are no patterns to the answers in terms of the A, B, C, and D. So you could have many A's in a row, for example. So if you find that you've put down 4 or 5 A's in a row, don't panic. That's probably all right. Another test-taking strategy you can use is a memory dump. Remember that you're going to have that scrap paper when you first go in. So, for example, those mnemonics that we talked about, first thing you can do is to sit down, take the scrap paper, and write down the mnemonics that you're afraid that you'll forget. That way they're right there on your scrap paper, and you'll have them to refer to. Pacing is an important part of this test. Remember, there are 50 minutes and 40 questions, so you can't spend much more than a minute on any question. Answer the easy questions or the ones that you are comfortable with first. All questions are worth 1 point, so don't spend any more than 2 minutes or so on any one question. If you can't get it in a minute or two, you've got to move on. Because let's say if you spend 5 or 6 minutes on one question, even if you get it right, that means that there's 3 or 4 questions you won't be able to answer at all because you spent so much time on that one question. So again, don't spend more than 2 minutes on any one question. If you can't get it in a minute or two, move on. You can go in any order within a section on this test. So again, complete the questions that you are strongest in first. Read the question carefully. In your head, tell yourself what the question is asking. What type of operation is necessary? That's perhaps the most important question. Do I need to multiply? Do I need to divide? Do I need to subtract? Do I need to set this up as an algebraic equation? What type of operation are they asking for here? And then make sure you've completed all the steps in the problem. Many of the questions on the Praxis II Mathematics have multiple steps. Don't worry if the answer seems too easy. It might be. Some of the questions are easy, some of the questions are very difficult. Check that you're filling in the correct bubble or clicking on the answer that you really want. When you're using scratch paper, be sure you copy the problem down correctly. Be sure to line up the place value correctly. And don't worry if you can't answer all the questions. You can pass this test without answering all the questions. Standardized tests are designed to be hard enough so that most people get some questions wrong. Figure out the problem before checking the answer choices. So in other words, don't even look at the answer choices until you come up with what you think is the right answer. If none of the answer choices they give matches your answer, then reread the question, recopy the numbers, and solve it again. Try using a different math strategy if possible. We've talked about this before. If you still can't figure the problem out, plug in each of the 4 answers to see which one might work. Rule out any answers that you know are wrong before you try this. So some of them might be just obviously wrong. Cross that out. You don't have to plug that one in. Let's talk about changing answers. The first answer you give is usually correct. Researchers have actually looked at this, and they found that when people changed their answers, they usually were right. So don't change your answer unless you are absolutely sure you are wrong. Don't change your answer just because you're worried and get anxious. If you have time left over, go back over your test, making sure you've checked the answer that you planned to answer. So in other words, check to make sure that C is really the answer that you wanted to put down. When you're thinking through multiple choice questions, you can use some other strategies. When they ask which of the following, substitute your answer for this phrase to see if it makes sense. Try putting the question in your own words. Circle or underline the important details. If you are working on the computer, then write down the important details on your scrap paper. Figure out what the question is asking, and then figure out the answer. Some of the questions will use the terms not, least, except. Read very carefully. If you find that you're starting to panic and you're reading the questions through very, very quickly, do some of the deep breathing exercises that you've been practicing for 4 weeks. Breathe deeply, relax your shoulders, and read the question very slowly. Make sure that you see those special words, not, least, except. Think through what they do want. For example, sometimes they'll say, which of these is not an example of X? So again, be very careful in reading the question. Some of the questions will have Roman numeral choices where there can be more than one correct answer. So they might say 1 and 2 only are correct, or 3 is only correct, 1 and 3. In order to figure out these questions, figure out the correct answers before you look at the choices so that you don't get too confused. The calculator is allowed for the Praxis II test. You can use a graphing, scientific, and 4-function calculator. They're all allowed. Know how to clear the memory on the approved calculator that you plan to use during the test. They will require you to do this. and just make sure you have a calculator that you know how to use. Don't pick up a calculator on the morning of the test and grab it as you're going out if it's one you've never used before. Think about getting the calculator you're going to use on the test right now and practice with that same calculator for the 4 weeks before you take your test. On the day of the test, make sure you sleep well. You've been told that since you were in elementary school, I'm sure. But I hope I've convinced you now that that's really important to improve your brain functioning. Eat breakfast. Wear a watch to keep track of the time. Practice your calming techniques before leaving for the test. Practice your calming techniques again while waiting for the test to begin. Go to the bathroom before the test. And slip those positive affirmation cards into your pocket and read over those. You can read them over before you leave the house. Read them over before the test starts. If you're in a computer test situation, they're not going to let you bring anything into the room. So when you write down and you're doing your memory dump on that scratch paper, you also might want to write at the top of that paper, I'm going to do well on this test. I can show them all I've learned. Be positive. Be calm. Know that all of your hard work in preparing for that test, all of your study sessions are going to your success. Good luck. We wish you all the best.